and you've done a lot of work with couples, and that's kind of where you specialize. So really wanted to kind of get some thoughts from you on what you think your top 10 kind of tips or key things that we need to be focused on in order for us to have healthy, happy relationships. So if you're happy to do a bit of an introduction to begin with, and then if you're happy just to crack straight on with your number one, and then once you've done that, I will sort of move on to the second one. So is that okay?
Perfect.
Great.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Really delighted to be here. Yes, just feel grateful actually, and there's always that fear that kind of bubbles up, you know, from everything I've done in my life, from all the terrible choices I've ever made, and from all the good ones. Now I'm being interviewed about this topic that is really important to me, and what occupies most of my time, helping other couples grow, create a better marriage, and create a better life for themselves. Because
Yeah.
I don't know about you, marriage is really hard. Not that caring's hard, just the relationship and what that asks of you
Yes.
actually is really quite it's really huge demand. Insert some kids into the mix there, and then you've got all sorts of problems.
Yeah.
But so what drew me to this work was certainly seeing examples of how relationships really didn't work. Otherwise known as my parents' marriage was just a complete disaster. So many behaviors, so much stuff going on, so much conflict, so much turbulence, so much fear, so much drama.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I just sort of thought this can't be the way. There
Mm-hmm.
must be a way to be happier in life. And there were lots of spin-off issues from their destructive relationship that affected me and my sister. And they were absolutely doing the best they could to just survive at the time. They never did any of it intentionally, but
Mm-hmm.
it led to it me having to go on a journey of discovering the impact of that and the consequences of that. And I wanted to know how to do it way better.
Nice.
And I actually bought a book called "What Women Want Men to Know" when I was 16.
Wow.
Um, and what I was hoping was it was going to teach me all the things I needed to know that about women,
Mm-hmm.
but unfortunately it was something I completely abused and used against women for my advantage. So I don't know if any of that rubbed off, um, but lo and behold, I was very interested in wanting to make marriage work, because I just had this idea that I was going to screw it up. I just
Mm-hmm.
knew I was going to, and I had a track record of just really poor performance in relationship. Suffice to say, I eventually ran into a brick wall that was Kerry that stopped me in my tracks.
Mm-hmm.
And just what an amazing woman, literally pulled me out of the gutter, taught me more of right from wrong. And I still didn't quite get it. I was still living in a way that made me the center of the universe,
Mm-hmm.
and people just kind of plug into that roughly. It was all about glorifying Ben Leppier, and
Mm-hmm.
what short-sighted vision that was. To the point of Kerry and I had, we weren't married at this point. We were about to marry. I'd been irresponsible around some choices in the way I was running a business at the time, and we ended up losing all of our money, a lot of borrowed investment as well. Kerry and I don't think it had a conversation about money at that point. It was just a money's there or thereabouts kind of thing. And at that point, I had no idea of the power and the value of a couple being on the same page, a married couple in particular, for all of what life throws at you. As soon as you start doing life with
Yeah.
somebody in marriage, you
Yeah.
have to be on the same. I don't know about the word have to, but it's incredibly wise to be on the same page as much as possible with that
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're pulling in different directions. It sounds
Yeah.
so obvious when you say it,
Yeah.
but if you're pulling in different directions, is another stress to have to deal with. And you're two completely different people. It's understandable, but there is a way for you to pull in the same direction, and then that big load called life you've got to carry with you becomes infinitely easier if you're both pulling the line.
Yeah.
Um, so I've done a lot of kind of success coaching, helping people make more money, helping people find more happiness individually, helping people recover from trauma, addiction. And finally, I wound up in marriage because um, I essentially, I saw that as a really important growth experience for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And oh, I just want to hit pause there, Tom, before I get into
Okay.
because I can't quite hear you, and I don't know if it's my headphones
Okay.
or it's the audio gone. Can you just say a few things?
Hello. Hello. I'm here. Can you hear
Hello,
me?
hello.
Yes. Hello.
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay. Good.
I wonder if you come through when I finally shut up. That'd be a good thing. Right. So what I realized I mean, I've been a coach for around 11 years now. I've clocked up a lot of coaching time and helping people go from where they are to where they want to be in life. And people tend to cross my path when they're ready for change. And
Yeah.
I've just chosen the path of marriage because it was had such a painful, damaging effect on me in my life. There's just something in me that's called me to that path. It might
Mhm.
change in the long term, but right now, helping families is just where it's at for me. It's a very
Mhm.
fulfilling work. It's fulfilling when it goes well. It doesn't always go well because adjustment and change is such a big deal.
Mhm.
So, and as you asked me, Tom, to share with you, what are the top 10 things
Yeah.
that are important to establish, um, almost guidelines, really? What are the top 10 guidelines that I would
Yeah.
recommend to any couple saying, how can we do this better? And
Yeah.
again, this isn't fact. This isn't the only way. This isn't the only path. So a bit of a disclaimer here. These are just principles that we see really help. And if you got all of these 10 on the same page with your partner, you're
Yeah.
gonna be doing better.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's the bottom line, really.
Yeah.
So you get to do what you like, but if you're tuning in and listening to this, you'd be wise to implement some of this stuff. So I've got some little numbers here, Tom.
Okay.
Number one,
Nice.
you have to understand yourself first.
Okay. What do you mean by
You
that?
have to know who you are, and by that I mean not just your name and if you're male or female. You've got to know what annoys you, what upsets you, what makes you feel joy, what makes you feel excited, what sends you into a tailspin, what
Mhm.
particularly presses your buttons. You have to know all of that stuff, because guess what, if you've chosen to get married, I know already, even not even meeting the listener, they've gone and chosen someone that knows exactly how to press the right buttons, just
Mhm.
to coin an old figure of speech. You've gone and done that, you crazy person. So it's wise to know you, because at that point you can make a distinction from they're doing something to me, and separate that from this is an experience I'm having.
Yeah.
So
I'm getting triggered.
despite what my partner's doing, as regardless of what they're doing, this is something that is affecting me now, and that becomes my responsibility rather than they're just doing it to me. And that's all their fault. So they have to then change it. If they changed what they were doing and how they were treating me, my life would actually be really happy. And that's the primary issue people come through this door with is,
Yeah.
can you please, Ben, can you just change my partner? Like, if you changed my partner,
Then everything
like,
would be fine.
like my life is perfect except for my spouse. So if we could just change them, spouse walks in. Ben, everything's perfect in my life. I'm fine. I'm happy, but my spouse is just, if you can change them, and I'm going, right, we've got a lot of work to do here, because in understanding yourself is almost the first step towards saying, my happiness is my responsibility, right?
Mhm.
And the world we live in says, um, an event occurs out there and it makes me feel a particular way. That's the way
Mhm.
the world works. So you've just done this. Now I feel this way, and it's your fault I feel that way.
Mhm.
And we're coming from a place of becoming more responsible if we want to be happier. And it says an event occurs in the outside world, and I am blessed with a choice in how to respond to that
Mhm.
event.
Mhm.
And most people don't know that. Most people jump straight from event to the way that they feel and react to it, because marriage asks so much of you, and you spend so much of your time together, and you let your partner into these deep dark crazy world that you've got going on the inside. And guess what? They're going to get in there and they're going to mess some stuff up. So you're going to find a lot of your stuff you'd rather keep a secret outed, and the outcome of that can be a real blessing, because you can know more about who you really are. So you kind of need your partner to dig up that stuff. But it's uncomfortable. Seeing the full extent of who you really are can be uncomfortable. Finally, on that first point, you have to understand yourself first, because marriage is like a bucket that, still on point number one here, that two people come together to pour what they have in. So this is me, this is Ben. I'm responsible for keeping this full, and I come to the table, in my marriage table, every day, and I pour in what I can into the bucket. Kerry's got her vessel as well. Kerry's is always perfectly full, obviously, and she pours that into the bucket. So then we can both take from the same source. But if it seems to you that you're the only one, or your partner's the only one pouring into that bucket, and you're the one taking, marriage is a very one-sided affair, and resentment builds really quickly if one of you feel like you're doing all the work and the other party is just taking. So marriage is really a what can I give rather than what can I take, which is a huge change. And so your ability to understand the level in this container and understand how much you're able to give sensibly and responsibly on a daily basis, that's knowing yourself. And your partner, spouse, will be blessed by the amount you can bring to the table, rather than constantly looking at, what am I getting from this relationship? Life can transform when you look at it as, what can I give and what can I bring? And that huge change for people is really hard, actually, Tom.
And I think it's a bit like you say, like, you're saying about having self-awareness of yourself. If I'm like, oh, I'm getting triggered by this situation, and I can say, hey, I've got nothing to give right now, and I'm owning that, then your partner at least is aware of that. It's not personal to them. They know it's not them. And also it makes it easier for them to give in that situation. It's like, oh, look, they're struggling. I can give a bit more right now if I'm able to do that. And it just takes the edge and the tension and the conflict out of that situation, rather than the other way, which is I'm now blaming them because I'm not getting what I feel I need in that situation, and I just end up in conflict. So I can see how those two things are quite linked together, really.
Exactly. That brings us on to point number two, Tom.
This is just we didn't even plan that.
We haven't spoken about this, honestly. That I am 100% responsible for my outcomes. Like that one line needs 5 minutes of silence, I think, for the fear and simultaneous joy. That it can be so liberating and so fearful at the same time. I am the master of my own destiny, for better or for worse. I am responsible for the choices I've made, and come on to point three, which is choice, in a moment. And I'm responsible for the choices I'm making right now. So for me, responsibility and choice go hand in hand, but they are separate, because there's almost a stake in the ground that says, I'm responsible for my mistakes. I'm responsible for the choices I make. End of the day, if my marriage is miserable, I'm creating that.
I'm at least making a reasonable contribution.
Sorry, go on, Tom.
So I'm at least making a reasonable contribution, aren't I?
Exactly. Any disaster in marriage has got often an equal portion of contribution to the disaster. It's almost never a one-sided event. Even very sensitive topics like infidelity, the perpetrator, there's the perpetrator and the victim, but has the victim of the infidelity been loving their partner in a way that their partner understands and can feel? But all of the topic and the light is shone on the perpetrator going out to commit the offense. But they're before the event happens, their marriage is a result of what they've both been putting into it.
Yes.
Right. That's so hard for people to hear.
Yeah.
So hard.
It's easy to ignore the previous 30 years and focus on the event that the bit that triggered you off the cliff, you know?
You, sweetheart, you've been married. I call both male and female sweetheart. You've been miserable for 30 years. Like the fact that one of you has committed adultery is just, it was gonna happen, right? So this is not what happened last Saturday night in a hotel somewhere. This has been building up for 30 years. And when people hear that, so we are 100% responsible for the choices we make on a daily basis for how nourished or undernourished that relationship is. And it's really hard. I'm not sat here like Mr. Victorious in an ivory tower. I've got 3 kids, Willow 3, Eden 6, just lost her first tooth yesterday, and Florence 8. They've all got their own buckets that all need nourishing each day. So we've gone bonkers and made a decision to have 3 kids. So now every time I walk into that house, 4 people stood there with not a vessel so much, but a bucket. Feed me emotionally.
Yeah.
And so I've chosen. Now we'll come on to point number 3. Look at this, Florence made me. Point number 3. I'm responsible for the choices I make. I made a choice to marry Kerry.
Yeah.
I made a choice to bring Florence. I made a choice to bring Eden. I made a choice to bring Willow. And so the consequences of those 4 choices are they want something from me. I've embarked on an important journey of a relationship with each one of those 4 people, and they are asking me for a spiritual, emotional, psychological, and even physical nourishment each day.
Yeah.
Yep. And what is required of me each day is huge, and it can be incredibly overwhelming. And that's primarily what we help people with here is making that step, doing that as best as we can, filling your own vessel, if you like, to pour in as much of that bucket as you can to love your family as effectively as possible. So responsibility to choice. Everyone must have the freedom to choose. So a really sobering question that we ask here when people are complaining about their spouse and what their spouse has been doing to them for the last 30 years, you know that you're choosing to be married to them. What do you mean? Well, are you choosing to be married to this person? Well, yeah, we're married, but he's blah, blah. Yeah, but you're choosing to be in this relationship, aren't you? To be honest with you. Yes, yeah, okay. I'm choosing to be married, and that takes some time to land. Almost back to that responsibility thing. It's so easy to blame what happens to you in life. It takes a backbone to say, point 2, I'm responsible for my outcomes, and number 3, my life as it is right now, and my life as it has been, whether I've been aware of the choices I've been making or not, my outcome is a direct result of the choices I've been making. So and that's one of the hardest experiences people have here, is waking up to the notion of what's been created as a direct result of the choices they made.
Yeah, and I think on a real practical sense, it's a real like day-to-day practical things like the choice not to engage, the choice to emotionally withdraw, to the choice not to communicate, you know, like, and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to sit here and wallow, and I'm not going to communicate with you about this problem because I just want to sit here and feel sorry for myself. And that's a choice. And every time I make that choice, I'm degrading the relationship. And it's hard. Sometimes I really want to sit here and wallow and feel sorry for myself and you know, reap the juice for all it's worth. But I have to at some point face the reality that that is a choice I'm making, and I might get a temporary, you know, sort of benefit from sitting here and wallowing in my pit. But ultimately, I'm making a long-term choice to degrade my relationship. So, you know, yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Tom. And those tiny choices add up in any environment you immerse yourself in. Am I making, even in the workplace environment, am I making a choice to be more proactive in taking on 0.5% more responsibility today? Right? If you make that, if that's your focus, and perspective for the day. If you add that up in the course of 3 days, it makes literally no difference at all. Case of 30 days, 0.5% a day, not much
Mm-hmm.
change. Over the course of 3 years, you've got
Mm-hmm.
a staggering change in how someone's moved from A to what would feel like Z if you're willing to make that daily commitment. And that's absolute. And I'm not vilifying anyone here. Like, you should just know this stuff, but complete responsibility looks like I'm choosing to just turn on the TV because it's just easier. I'm choosing to not say to Kerry, "You've done great homeschooling the kids all day." Like, I say that multiple times per day to Kerry. She's got 3 kids. We're in lockdown again. She's stuck in, not stuck, that's not quite true, but she's got all kids that she needs to manage, do some kind of schooling best she can. We've got a demanding 3-year-old. So it's a choice of mine multiple times today today again to stop her and say, "You're doing amazing with these kids. I'm
Mm-hmm.
so grateful that you're
Mm-hmm.
bothered, that you're here, that you're present." I say that, okay, let's say twice a day. I'd like to say more. Let's say on average twice a day. Tom, every time I say that to Kerry, she looks at me like she's never heard it before. I've said it already that morning, and I've said it twice the day before, and she just, oh, it's like I've just stepped over and just taken this weight off of her back,
Yeah.
because I have to understand myself. Principle number one, that's my job. I can't expect Kerry to know herself. I can't expect that. It's unfair. So, in knowing me, in knowing how much I've got to give, in knowing what she needs, I can take something to her when when it's yeah, it's just a choice I'm able to make, and it's almost sneaky because it doesn't take much effort at all, but it's so easy not to do.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it has such a big impact on doing it or not doing it. Those little tiny things can have, like you said, they build up over time. And like, if hypothetically, if Kerry was the type of person who might be giving herself a bit of a hard time, I haven't kind of done it. Oh, I feel like I haven't done well enough with the kids today and stuff like that. And just that one comment might be, "Hey, look, it's okay. You're doing your best you can." And it's a sort of, when somebody else says it, it's like it has a bigger impact, doesn't it? Sometimes you give yourself more of a hard time than you would somebody else. Somebody else is doing it. You're like, "Look, you're doing great. Don't worry about it." But sometimes you can give yourself a bit of a hard time. So it's like, it's knowing, like you said, knowing your partner and kind of knowing yourself and stuff. So
And I'm really trying not to be Superman here. Some people might be listening saying, "Well, I get in from work and I'm exhausted." So it's a choice to take an extra 10 minutes in the car then for you to meditate, calm down, slow down, turn your phone off, and
yeah,
get yourself to a place where you're more prepared to enter the home,
yeah,
right? And
yeah.
I directly resonate with that. Yeah. So I'm sure you're the same as me, Tom. You're not expecting miracles from anyone. I know you
Mhm.
very well. So it's okay that if you need to, the example was Mr. Wonderful over here giving Kerry and distributing all of his love all over the place. But sometimes you just ain't got it.
Yeah,
So rather than going in with your bucket empty into the home and saying, "Where's mine? I deserve mine," you might need to go and do something to take responsibility for that. Again, it's such an important point. And choose, another important point, to
yeah.
fill your bucket before you go into the home where it's inevitably going to be emptied by your family.
Yeah, yeah, and I think for me personally, that's about like having space. Like, sometimes you just need a bit of space. Like, I just need some space. Like, this is just, maybe. Yeah, the other day I had this really weird dream, and I just woke up and I just felt odd, and I was a bit snappy with the kids, and like I just knew I wasn't myself. I felt strange. I just didn't, and I said to Claire, I just don't feel right at all. And just getting a bit of space, just like, look, I'm just going to go and just get some space for a minute, so that you're not infecting that situation with how you feel. And it wasn't necessarily a thing I could really have that much control over. An event had happened and I just didn't feel nice. And
Mm.
the best I could do was sort of acknowledge it and try to take some responsibility for it. So sometimes that's the best you've got, isn't it?
Exactly. And then Claire has got some information from you to enable her to make some good choices. Right, Tom is not a source for me right now. You know,
Yeah.
he's just shrinking, shriveling away in the corner like some prune. So he's gonna have nothing. So it's senseless me sending the kids in to get anything from him. What options and choices do I have available to me right now? I'm just going to take the kids out then for 30 minutes,
Yeah.
right? And to be honest with you, Kerry has fed back to me, when you're done up in the sheep shack, which is where I do my work, the office technically, um, you go ahead and take another 30 minutes to just rest and get what you need, because we need full you. Like, we'll have none
Yeah.
of this just coming down because it's time. We want a ready for action father and husband to come back down here.
Yeah.
So you do whatever you got to do. Don't think just because your calls are finished, you just come straight back down. I've gone, yeah, that makes sense. I just needed to hear that. So again, choice, responsibility, and knowing yourself is all in there. Brings us on beautifully to number 4, Tom.
Okay. Go for it.
Marriage has got to be your number one priority. So in this determining of who I distribute my resources to, Kerry has to be number one.
Mm-hmm.
Has to be number one. I am Kerry's number one,
Yeah.
right? We haven't got time to go into the intricacies of what that looks like in every facet of life here, but that is our framework, if you like, of how we make decisions and how I distribute my time with other people. Even if that relationship is quite nourishing for me, you're spending emotional money. I guess
Mm-hmm.
that's a really helpful way to look at it. I've got a budget each day of £50, and how I distribute those funds to take me down to zero, to leave some in savings, leave £10 on the plus side of the budget, or be in minus figures, is a daily personal management choice, I guess you could put it like that. Who's my number one priority? Kerry. Whenever I am investigating, whenever I'm immersing myself in my home, I go straight for Kerry every
Mm-hmm.
time. What what
Mm-hmm.
what what do you need from me? Because I've just got to open the door like, a millimeter, and I can hear da 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 da
Demands.
da 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 da. I don't know what to say about it. I can't believe how challenging it is. So I just push them all to one side with a broom, and I make a beeline for Kerry,
Mm-hmm.
because it's so the kids want from me, sure, but they need to see that our marriage and my relationship with Kerry is our number one priority. Now they
Yeah.
get to be number two priority,
Yeah.
but they don't know yet that the real power of them not feeling responsible for me and how I show up, that's Kerry's job. That's my job. They,
Mm-hmm.
they, they don't need to feel that they have a part in that.
Yeah.
And it's a very sensitive topic, because that's not what's displayed in most homes.
Mm-hmm.
So making your partner your number one priority. What are we doing this weekend? Who are we spending time with? How many hours at work are you going to spend this week? I know money's important, but there's a cost to your resources. So right in the early days, Kerry and I literally pulled this right back to bare bones. And as a couple, we're just looking at how we're spending our time, who we're spending it with, who gets crossed off that list, who we can increase time with. And we just make all those choices, get on the same page with all those choices, to honor that my spouse is my number one priority.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really helpful way to manage life, actually,
Yeah.
Tom. So
And you've got that
5.
like sense of
Sorry, Tom, go
unity.
on.
You've got that sense of unity, that sense of like connection, commitment together that is unsaid. Like like over time, like it begins with being said, but over time it becomes more unsaid. That kind of just like,
Thank you.
I know I can rely on. I know I have this thing, and I don't necessarily need to say it. I know it's there, and I suppose that's kind of the journey, isn't it? Is to build that sort of unsaid connection. And it's funny because some of the stuff you're saying, I'm like, I think I definitely need to do a lot of this more consciously. But like I was thinking about when the kids, because Claire and the kids get home from school, so Claire works at their school, so they all come home together, and I always sort of like go ask Claire first, kind of like, how her day has been. And I suppose, but I haven't been doing that consciously, and I think that's the kind of I think the one takeaway from me is like that has to be the real conscious choice. Rather than just a bit of a habit I've formed, it needs to be that real conscious choice, to kind of and making that statement and making that the priority. So yeah.
Yeah, you just introduced a beautiful word of being conscious. For me, I tend to have to screw this up loads of times before I seem to become more conscious of what actually works. This is the first time anyone's probably hearing me here. And it's just absolutely not been this way. These are principles that I've been doing my best to implement terribly. You just have to email Kerry, for the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. So just, and I guess I encourage people listening, if there's just one thing you can take away that you might be able to, I like the phrase, take a step towards doing differently, that's enough. I talk about this stuff and practice this stuff as best I can day in, day out, but this isn't brand new for me. And some of these principles you might not even resonate with and connect with, and that's absolutely okay. Just the encouragement to do one thing differently, to just as an experiment. Don't take it from me. Apply that idea and see how that works for you over the course of 7 days. That's the way to do it.
Okay, great. What's your next one?
Principles 5 and 6 here, Tom.
5 and 6. Okay, together. What are they?
Sex and money. So the topic of sex must always be open for discussion.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
I mean, this is probably a whole other another episode in itself, and in light of time, probably keep this to a minimum because it's such a sensitive topic as well.
Yeah.
Sex can become manipulated, abused. Most people come with a lot of confusion about what sex really is, how to even have sex, how sex is actually a complement to a loving, happy relationship. Can I say unequivocally that men are the most confused? Yes. Not a high percentage of the time men are most confused. So what eventually people just bumble through with sex somehow, and then eventually it becomes this very unwieldy idea of, and both people have such different needs around it, same sex, and different sex marriages as well. but I encourage people to always keep that chapter open. So at any time you can say, hey, I would really like to have a chat with you about sex. Pick a time in the day. It's unlikely for it to work if you just say it whenever you want, which is how most people manage it. Why haven't we had sex? Or when are we going to get around to having sex again? So I'm going to encourage people to always have the page open around the topic of sex. Just talking about the subject of sex is really healthy for couples.
Yeah.
Most couples, men, don't want to talk about it too much in case that it puts their partner off. And most women, again, making gross generalizations here, they don't want to open up the topic of sex because they think, and the track record says, if I say the word sex, he's going to become very excited and assume because I'm mentioning the word, we have to go, I have to go have sex now.
Yeah.
But to make it a topic that is inert, essentially, that can be opened up at any point, as long as there's an arrangement of time. It's just it's healthy. It's a healthy way to look at it.
Desensitize, almost desensitize.
Always open for.
Sorry, to desensitize the discussion almost. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly that. We can open up the page. Let's just discuss it. We don't, just because we talk about sex, we have to have it. No. That comes as a, sex and money are two of the biggest conflict topics in marriage. So you also must have the same plan, the same page open on money. Kerry and I learned the hard way from this. Our story is, as I introduced in the beginning, everything was about me, Ben Leppier, and I ended up financially irresponsible and didn't take care of what I had taken on in my previous business, and we lost a whole lot. And at that point, Kerry Kerry was really good with numbers and money management, but it was completely separate.
Hmm.
That I'm doing my thing, she's doing her thing. Lo and behold, I lost everything, and she's directly responsible for the consequences of that as my wife now.
Yeah.
And to think the way we manage money now is just literally a phoenix from the flames after we paid back all the money that we'd lost. That was hard, but the best. Our financial education cost Kerry and I in the hundreds of thousands of pounds
Yeah.
because it just wasn't given as a priority in my home. It was a conflict ridden subject, so it was just avoided or
Yeah.
argued around.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like me and Claire, definitely we never really had any kind of agreements about it. And again, we went through a particularly difficult financial situation and stuff like that. So we basically just made some really clear agreements about, this is our budget for food. This is the amount we're going to get to have each. Or I'll let you just do that. You guys back.
I can hear you fine, Tom. Yep.
Okay, yeah. So this is the amount we got, like an amount each month that we can spend on whatever we like. There's no restrictions. It's our money and we can spend it. And just having those kind of just doing that made a huge difference because we just had a clear and agreed budget, and then we took all the conflict out of it. Because there's no like, oh, I'm worried that somebody's spending a bit too much money on themselves. There is no, all of that's been taken out because we have an agreed amount each month and you get to spend that how you like. So yeah, and I think both of these points, I was thinking about that when you were talking about the whole sex thing, is that there's not really any teaching that happens like as children, as adolescents and into adulthood. Nobody sits down and says, this is how you need to talk about this in a relationship and this is why it's important. Nobody says that. And we just sort of like you say, you almost just bumble into it, and it's such a huge part of relationships, and yet we don't talk about it, and we don't educate our children about it, about the role it has in relationships or anything like that. And and it's no wonder really we end up in kind of conflict about it. And that same point applies to money. How many times do we teach our kids how to organize your money in a relationship so that there's less conflict and that you're clearer and I think for me, the other thing I think for me and Claire, or for me personally in my relationship with Claire, is a sense of unity around our money. Is that once we'd kind of established that, we felt like we were doing it together because we got like a clear agreement, and it kind of felt like we were united in our approach. And it's like night and day. The difference is night and day. So
I just love that word, unity. You being united. To be honest with you, for me, it almost doesn't matter about the details. There's nothing more fulfilling and nourishing than you being on the same page as your partner.
yeah.
Which beautifully, Tom, you seem to have. We honestly haven't rehearsed this, but brings on to point 7.
Yes.
Um, Asking for what you want clearly with words. We just make no end of assumptions,
Hmm.
and you're an expert in the workplace, Tom. There's no end of assumptions that are made in that environment. There's no
Hmm.
end of assumptions that are made in marriage.
Hmm.
So have you clearly asked for what you want with words? Like, this is almost 100% of the time. And what actually comes back isn't they go straight from I don't know to um I well, I think so, because they people just don't know. People have never been taught that idea. What we use is behavior, madness,
Hmm.
manipulation,
Hmm.
unconsciousness, to use the opposite of the term you introduced us to earlier on, Tom, to kind of get what we want enough of in life. And most people just settle for that.
Yeah.
That just doesn't work in marriage. That
Yeah.
really builds resentment. People can feel permanently manipulated. People are unclear about what's expected of them. And we think because we've had this thought in our head and we're clear, chances are you're really not, and we express 25% of that to our partner, that they're just going to be on the same page. A rule for me is if they can't repeat it back to you almost verbatim, almost word for word, they haven't heard it.
Yeah.
And then back to down the list of principles here, it's your responsibility to be heard, to be clear with your partner. It's not
Yeah.
their responsibility to interpret.
Yeah, and just because, I've said something, I can't assume that you've understood it in exactly the same way that I meant it. I have my own thoughts and my own understanding. Yeah, and I often say it's a bit like, we have you ever felt disappointed because you didn't get what you didn't ask for? Like we get disappointed. You didn't even ask for it, and yet you feel disappointed. And then you feel resentful because you didn't get what you didn't ask for. It's like don't.
The laughter, I wish I would have made that a principle. The lightheartedness of this stuff. Richard Rohr's got a great quote that says, a young man that cannot cry is a savage, and an old man that cannot laugh is a fool.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, 38 now, 39 this year, I'm just looking at, where are you really lighthearted around your mess ups and mistakes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a long, steep learning curve for me. That lightheartedness of learning, kids learn with a sense of awe and wonder. Adults are, what, I should already know this. No, like you've pointed out in this call, Tom, you haven't been taught, so how can you expect yourself to know? We go and plummet into this pit of despair and embarrassment and shame almost because we didn't know this simple principle of budgeting and forecasting. But if finances in your home were just swept under the rug and you were told you were too stupid to know, or it was none of your business, how's that going to go for you when you become an adult?
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And the notion of the track is set really at a very young age, and what you were exposed to, what you were role modeled, what you absorbed, is pretty much set. But you and I, Tom, are testaments of, I guess, almost a miraculous, it's really blowing the trumpet there, that change is absolutely possible if you're willing to learn, if you're lighthearted about it, and if you get clear on a plan of where you're heading. And I strongly recommend you get your spouse on board with that, right?
And it's funny because, like, sometimes sometimes in our house, like either me or Claire is getting angry and frustrated with the kids because it can be endlessly frustrating at times. And sometimes I'll laugh with each other and say, how's that working out for you? Are you all right there? And just having a bit of fun and being willing to sort of laugh at yourself a little bit can be a helpful tool to, again, desensitizing yourself to the mistake and desensitizing yourself to not beating yourself up and all that. Look, I'm just having a bad day today. That doesn't discount the good that I have been able to do. So,
which again brings me on to point 8, which Florence, she put 9. Like she wouldn't have felt ashamed by that. I've made a mistake. I'm just going to scribble it out.
How
Isn't
nice.
that beautiful? Brings me on to find someone who can hear you, right? If your spouse can't hear you right now, you're going to have to consult someone with experience that is going to be able to call you and support you in pointing out the things that you do that aren't helpful, right? I've been through the mill with this. So you mentioned, like, just that face, I don't know if you mentioned the facial expression of, we don't realize we're in that place when we're in there and the face gets all distorted and twisted up. And no, I'm perfectly relaxed. your face does not say you're perfectly relaxed. And how I manage that with the girls is I pick them up and show them in the mirror. They don't want to be shown in the mirror, to show them a reflection of how miserable they're choosing to be right now. And they just burst out laughing. They can't believe it, right? You show most adults a mirror of how miserable they are, and they go, well, yeah, because it's him, because it's his fault or her fault, right? But you show a child and they're like, what am I doing? It's just naturally that, what would have possibly possessed me to be so miserable and grumpy in this moment? And then it's always met with a burst of laughter, and they can see choice over emotions at that age.
Yeah.
No, we just like juicing it, holding on to it, but takes practice to do things differently. So point 8 was find someone who can hear you and point out your madness. If your spouse just can't right now, okay, you
Mhm.
can't expect your spouse to be your coach, your mentor, your spiritual guide, whatever works for you.
Mhm.
You can't expect that. And if you don't trust someone to really point out your stuff right now because it can be painful, just I just encourage people to find 5 minutes a day where you're finding some silent time where phones go off, where you just switch off, close your eyes, and just focus on your breath to just get out, just take a step out of your stuff for just 5 minutes. It's a really powerful practice and something
Yeah.
that everyone can do, and men in particular benefit from that stopping kind of
Yeah.
time.
And one of the tools I put in the course was about just bringing some of this stuff out in the open, but even in the workplace, we say, who you've got a team meeting on a Friday, you say, right, who got really defensive this week? Like, let's just, and in a fairly light-hearted way, yeah, I spoke to Bob in accounts and I just got so defensive and it just didn't go well, and so I can bring it out into the open. We can have a conversation about it. And I've got the opportunity to learn rather than just being stuck in my defensiveness and hiding my mistakes and hiding my behavior or defending my behavior and all that kind of stuff that just doesn't help. So just bringing it out into the open, having the conversation about it, admitting it, bringing it out your own mouth, there's something releasing, isn't there? That,
It,
yeah, I was a real
and
arse.
it's so Oh, and the energy that frees up, organize. I'm sure there must be orchestration for an organization and a vision, but it requires energy. It
Mm,
requires good energy, and the energy that's freed up from letting that stuff go. I mean, I'm just holding on so tight, and I speak to people here about a whole plethora of different issues, and some of them describe letting go of certain addictions. Pornography, addiction to money, addiction to this, that, and the other. They describe the letting go of it like losing an old best friend that has been very reliable for them for literally as long as they remember. So the best friend is a bully, by the way,
yeah,
makes
yeah,
me feel miserable, but
yeah,
I'd rather have a best friend
yeah,
around that I
yeah,
can rely on to be there,
yeah,
even though they beat me over the head with a hammer,
yeah,
than to have nothing.
yeah.
And that's how it can
Comfortable.
feel sometimes when you uproot and let go of some of these unproductive, inefficient behaviors, because it's just the way you've always done things. And
Mm-hmm.
not it's not happening in a conscious space, but we're so attached to that. It's just, yeah. And in a team meeting might not be the place for you to out that right now, but I strongly recommend that you do get someone to help you see that, because one thing most people want is to be happier, and there are just a whole there are a number of behaviors that we can't use and be happy at the same time, which I know you're
Mm-hmm.
covering in a lot of your course material here, Tom. So
Yeah.
I'll leave that to the expert.
You're gonna go on to 9.
Sorry, Tom, can you say that again?
You're gonna go on to 9. Or is it?
Yes, go on to 9. Yes. um, Finding things, these last two are really gentle, finding things that you enjoy doing together.
Mm-hmm.
Partners that have fun together stay together. On our website somewhere we've got an activity that looks like we've listed literally any activity that a couple could do together, and it's not so much where couples fall down with that is they've only explored stuff that they really really like. And um, Kerry doesn't like football and I don't like making candles. So, how can we possibly spend time together? But if you're willing to look hard enough, there's in the realm of all of the activities, there are hundreds and hundreds of activities you could do together. That there are at least two or three that you guys would enjoy. And Kerry and I didn't realize that we'd enjoy walking as much as we do. So it's not up there as the best thing that Ben would like to do with his time. It's not
Yeah.
right up there with the best thing that Kerry would like to do with her time. But is it an activity we can do together and get enough enjoyment from? And that connecting time, I cannot emphasize enough how important that is.
Mm-hmm.
We to be honest, we like doing things that we like doing. Not everyone likes walking, but I can't underline enough the power and benefit of you finding an activity that you can do with your spouse and enjoy together.
Mm-hmm.
And having fun together is just, yeah, we just don't have enough fun, right?
Yeah.
On to number 10. Where's Florence put my number 10? Here she is. 10.
Ta-da.
Always look to what to be grateful for,
Mm.
not to look for what's missing.
Mm.
There's a time and a place for making an account of what might be missing and what could be improved in marriage, but it is a training to be focusing on the things to be grateful for, the things to feed back, to build your partner up as often as you possibly can. Some people feel so afraid that if they build their partner up too much, they're just going to fly away with another new partner, newer, younger model.
Yeah.
But if you're the conduit to build your partner up and to be grateful for what you have, it just has this way of coming back to you tenfold.
Yeah.
And yeah, not to get too soapboxy around it, but it's just a way to live, and
Yeah.
choosing to be grateful for, rather than how we're conditioned in your maths homework, where you're looking for you don't see all the ticks, you're just looking for that red cross, and
Yeah.
I've got 99 right, but oh look, I've got that one wrong, and then you
Mm-hmm.
overlook all of the great work you did. You're just
Mm-hmm.
focusing on what went wrong, and that attitude it's just heavy and unproductive.
Yeah, and I think when things aren't great, like trying to find some things that you can hang on to or identify that that are good, and that what is that there will be some good in here somewhere potentially. Identifying that and expressing it, and can just help create a bit more of a reinforcing positive cycle rather than not doing that, and you just get stuck in this kind of downward spiral sometimes, don't you? So it's like, one good way to try and help to just wind yourself out of that. And so it's something that both of you can do today, tomorrow. It's a really practical thing.
Oh, you can look for the, when you introduce this to someone as an idea, they're like, well, I'm grateful that they have sex with me occasionally, and I'm grateful that he brings all the money in. I'm talking like, I'm grateful for light. I'm grateful for the fact that when you speak to me, you look at me in the eyes. I'm grateful that you touched my hand this morning when we woke up. You know, if I challenge anybody, if you were willing to start your day not with your phone, not with Facebook, not with news, if you were to start your day with a list of 3 things to be grateful for, that was the first thing you did, you put pen to paper and you did that for a year, I can guarantee you'd be a happier person. But what we look at predominantly, media says, look at me, and you get what you focus on,
Yeah.
and from all these principles, it's a daily choice. Are you going to focus on what you're grateful for, or what's making you miserable? Up to
Yeah.
you.
And I think one thing that really occurred to me when you were saying that, you were talking about like touch, and I went out of our bedroom this morning and I just sort of brushed Claire's back on the way out. And I think, like, sometimes just that physical connection, like even as fleeting as it can be, can make a real difference. But if you don't express the fact that you're grateful for that and it made a difference and it was it was nice for you, then how does the other person know that?
How
Like,
do they
to
know?
you it might be, oh, I really appreciated that gesture, but the other person might not know whether you did or not. And whereas if we've expressed it, I was really grateful you did this or whatever you did, then the other person, you're like, oh, cool, well, I could perhaps do more of that.
Yeah.
So
I gave the example of just feeding back to Kerry how great she's doing, because it's damn hard right now
yeah.
for her. Absolutely. I've got all the kids tomorrow. I have them on a Thursday, and I am exhausted at the end of that day. We're not even we built a volcano last week with some paper mache around it, and I couldn't quite get the explosion to happen with the bicarbonate of soda. I was so stressed about not doing it right. So I stress myself out more than they stress me. So Kerry says, we had a relationship review on Sunday. She said, it just melts me when you tell me that I'm doing a good job. And I'm sat there thinking, this must be like a broken record for her right now. Like I say this twice a day at least, same thing. She's like, it's so nice to hear. And I'm like, I can't hear that enough. You know, that's
Yeah.
so helpful for me to say what you're doing is working, but my head says, no, you know, oh, a bit doubt, a bit, no, this can't be working, blah, blah, blah. Ask them,
Yeah.
ask them what they want, ask them what they think, ask them.
Yeah. Nice. Nice. Okay, cool. Well, listen, it was an excellent run through of your kind of top 10 tips. And I think that there's so much in here, you know, easily someone could watch this 5 times and still kind of get various different things. You kind of had loads of little one-liners that, you know, like that one little liner there could be a transformative part of a relationship. And so I think we just can't learn enough of this stuff, and kind of reflecting, like you said, having somebody who can perhaps help us guide us through that as well, and just really help us to have those healthier, more connected, more united relationships that like are life changing. You know, that's a life changing thing, and we tend to kind of we like work because we can have more control over those relationships. Like there's more structure, whereas we come home and there's less organized structure. We can't, you don't report to me. I can't sit here and dictate some of the terms in a way that I might do in a working environment. And so that's why it brings in all this complexity. By the same token, we often take some of all those things you described there, we take them into the workplace, and all these behaviors and manipulation, all that kind of stuff is still going on. We're just a bit more nice about it, maybe. We just hide it better. You know, so I think doing this work in your own relationship is a great way for you to be able to. It's a great learning environment. So cool. So thank you very much for your time. And yeah. All right.
Thanks, Tom.
Ben.
Great to see you, bud.
Bye.
Cheers.